Chapter 30 of Psychopomp Drive. Written by Janeen Leese-Taylor. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. Chapter 30 Mon Ami. Each slice of Finley's battle axe hit home, and he jumped and spun and slashed through the air from one movement into the next. The crowds of living souls disappeared past them on all sides, while flashes of light from above disorientated and blinded in the coming evening. Tables and chairs previously left neatly stacked outside of coffee shops were knocked over in the stampede, the ground underfoot becoming sticky with blood and spilled caffeinated beverages. Glass bulbs rattled outside the red, white, and brew, and tiny colorful flags of bunting were tugged and pulled in all directions by the wind, lashing violently against their bindings. The sounds of breaking glass and screams amplified off the narrow walls, and fire blossomed where the rioters set rubbish bins alight and sent them streaming through shop windows. Corrupted humans smashed into Finley's ribs with makeshift weapons and closed fists, foaming at the mouth and feral as rabid dogs. As the Amarini fought his way through the crowds, the flying elbows and passing voices made his head spin. Other Amarini hopped along the banisters overhead, fighting back the steadily growing streams of hollows.
"You wanted this,"
the whisperers crowed from overhead.
"You longed for the devastation. Shatter it, break the world, and start anew."
Micah leapt past him, her sword glistening pink in the failing sunlight as she brought it down through the crowds. The magical blade of the Reaper passed right through the living souls, leaving them unharmed as it ripped the hollows from within them, the blue mist of their souls vanishing as soon as they appeared. An Amarini with white ears leant over the barrel of a sniper rifle in the rafters above, the ping of her stellar shots firing the evil spirits out from within the human hosts. "Well, that's a bit unfair," Finley remarked as the ping of magical metal flew past his ears. "So inelegant," Reichardt scoffed. Scrappy's guiding hands led the victims to safety beyond the barricades, encouraging them to move back towards the relative security of the East Gate. The clock there chimed for 8 p.m. Its face, like those of the people beneath it, was shocked and still and shining in the last vestiges of light. Finley paused to watch the people go, knowing that they were heading in the direction of what was once his home. He swallowed down his anxieties.
"You have to trust that the others will keep Thorn safe."
Traveling through the shifting mass of the crowds, he could make out Reichardt's tall form, bent over the broken body of a small child. He held the blonde girl close to his chest, her blood staining his pale skin with crimson streaks. He collided with a medic in a fluorescent uniform, and he pressed the child into their waiting arms, leaning close to whisper instructions in their ear as he drew away again in search of other survivors. The crowds parted with alarm as the dark form of Sallow streaked past at a sprint, his long tail corralling people out of harm's way. He snarled, swiping down a corruptor from over his head and crushing them against the cobblestones.
The hollows are increasing in strength, he roared. The destroyer must be feeding them somehow.
A buzzing sound by Finley's ear made him turn, and he slammed the side of his blade into a passing river of voices, sending the minuscule creatures scattering through the air and away from the main body of the hollow. Elliot leapt up to create a wisp of purple light in the air, stepping through the veil of smoke and spinning like a ballerina on a strip of thin wire. "Mataia she shouted, and the hollows around her erupted into bursts of steam. The figures of the young men and women that came from within them joined her in her dance, moving higher and higher into the air until they were almost out of sight. Finley reached out a hand to ease her transition to the ground again, and she flashed him a bright smile from beneath her long bangs. "Thanks for the assist, new kid."
"Happy to help,"
he replied, spinning on his heels with a rush of light as they were both pulled back into the crowds again. Finley stumbled as a chair splintered across his back, and he felt himself being pulled in all directions, the hands of the corrupted humans grabbing onto his coattails and hood. His head was spinning, and his hands reached out blindly for purchase. Black-eyed figures bit down hard on the arms of his jacket, and he let out a grunt of pain as he weaved, pulling against their combined strength to throw them back towards the crowds. He swore under his breath as he checked the damage, taking note of the fraying of the fibers along the cuffs.
"Thank the gods for otherworldly craftsmanship,"
he mused, testing the clothing's give. The touch of a firm hand on his back made him raise his head from the jacket. When he caught the sight of Alvaro's familiar gray scruff of facial hair, he couldn't help but grin.
"You all good there, Liladu?"
"I'll live," Finley remarked playfully. Alvaro's own grin widened.
"That's the spirit,"
he said, and slammed his hammer into a passing, red-eyed human. The living host was knocked clear of the corruptor inside them, which spun and hissed as it flew back in their direction. Alvaro tightened his grip on the handle of his reaper, swinging it like a hitter aiming for a home run.
"Batter up!"
he shouted. Dropping down from above, Spectre sealed the dark forms within the bright bubble-like shapes of his magic, whispering a quiet prayer as he descended. He landed with a pleased grin, waving to the spirits around him as they vanished in a twinkling of pale sunlight, exorcised of their anguish. He twisted back towards them, bright eyes excited as he chirped,
"I believe that awards me 10 more points, Alvy."
Alvaro laughed loudly in response, resting his hammer against his shoulder with something like pride.
"Ha ha ha! That it does, spoke poika. Next time I'll be sure to hit it farther. Give you more of a challenge."
For each enemy they exorcised or pushed back, a dozen more invaded the space, and the Amarini worked in tandem with the gods to clear as much of the city center as they could. The road filled with light whenever the powerful gods of the dead attacked, and the hollows that were driven out of their living hosts fizzled in the air, dissolving completely under the force of their magic. and freeing those who had previously been corrupted. Striding between the fleeing humans, Anubis was a striking figure, over 6.5 feet tall and strong. The animal-headed god showed no hesitation in wiping out the hollows that came his way. There would be no judgment, no duat or weighing of the feather for the souls on this day. They either released their hold or they perished. Today, these souls will be relinquished by a sword and a fist.
Mutaetasite!
He commanded, his hands spread out towards the black spirits all around them. The jackal bowed his head in prayer as he sent more of the dark creatures to the plains beyond their waking world. He hoped amongst the field of reeds that they could at last find peace. A beam of light shot out ahead of them and sent corrupted humans collapsing to the ground in its wake. Their skin was dyed black with corruptors, the tiny bubbling forms springing forth to attack as a woman with deep blue skin made her way towards them. Her hair floated over her head like the flame of a thin candle, dancing in the wind. With one hand, she sent dazzling icicles across the cobblestones, and with the other, she bound the corrupted souls in enchanted rope, ensnaring them for the Amorini that followed behind her to purge. They obediently exorcised the souls with prayers and paper charms, barely making a sound as they passed through. The sound of a bell tinkled in the air, a perfectly pitched sound that Finley felt right to his core. Auron floated on a jet stream just over Finley's head, the sounds of his shifting clothes signaling his arrival. He extended out the roots from the carefully crafted flower boxes around them and used them to pull the vulnerable and injured out of the way of the pounding feet. Unconscious civilians hung from the shop fronts, put to sleep by the power of his natural magic. The skeletal face of the god beamed beneath his furry cowl, and Finley knew that he was remembering the years when he was able to walk amongst the living. He felt useful again, praised in a way that he had not for many, many years. The two spirits that served as the Grimms from his domain rushed to treat those he rescued, checking for pulses and applying emergency first aid to those who needed it. The residents of Psychopomp Drive led the way through the main streets, pushing the enemy forces down and past the North Gate Arena with its red brick walls and tin roof. Bicycles rested against disheveled boxes of red flowers, and people hid inside the sealed glass doors, peering out in a mixture of fear and curiosity as they marched past. Glass bottles filled with hollows that could not be freed rattled along the walls as they awaited collection. The Amorini rescue teams flitting past to steal them away in the blink of an eye. Even without the spells that hid them, these were spirits that were used to not being seen, their footsteps as light as a kitten's paw on snow. The crowds followed the Liverpool Road, past nursing homes and schools, spreading out to check bed and breakfasts and taxi offices for escaped hollows. By the old brick building that was Kingsley Lodge, they rested on the wall outside to gather themselves and catch whatever breath they could. The students housed inside, once waiting for final examinations, did not shy away from the perceived threat. Instead, they had taken to arms, batting away the hollows with rolling pins and spatulas, colanders being worn as makeshift helmets. One of the young men punched the air in solidarity, calling out to them as their classmates joined in with a chorus of their own.
Ah, the everlasting bravado of the young,
Aaron cooed fondly from Finley's left.
They feel as immortal as we do today. They'll never let this city of theirs go down without a fight.
Pride burned like a warm flame in Finley's chest, and he waved and cheered with them as they traveled. For one moment, no matter how fleeting it was, they were all fighting on the same side. They could see them for what they really were, and they still cheered.
We didn't give the city enough credit,
he thought. Cars lay abandoned in the streets before them, engines idling as their owners stood just inside open doors. Ambulances blared horns and sirens, trying to get past the blockages that had started to form. Finley could feel their eyes on them, could feel every unasked question. The electronic tones of recording phones lit up the silver-haired Amarini's awareness, and he glanced towards them with a shy smile. Around the world, pictures and videos showing the secret residence of PPD would be passed between friends and co-workers. It would be almost impossible for them to hide now.
We'll worry about the amateur paparazzi another time, Finn,
Alvaro muttered, taking his arm and directing him forward.
Right now, we have more important fish.
They passed Deva Lane and over the Linksway, past Percival Road and the turnoff to Prosser. It was hard to tell how many miles they had moved without the indicator of exertion a human body would have experienced. Even in the spring warmth, Finley had barely broken a sweat. The Fox Barracks on their left was alive with frenzied activity when they approached from the side. The Cheshire Army Cadet Force had assembled in their green uniforms to bring aid and support, pulling victims in from the roads, handing out supplies to the living and the dead alike. One man did a double take as Caron reached out to take one of the offered juice boxes, the bones of the spirit's hand wrapping around the carton carefully.
Thanking you kindly,
his deep voice rumbled, and the soldier blanched, nodding in response.
Sure, no problem.
Caron grinned to himself as he popped the straw through the top, placing the other end through the gaps in his teeth.
What a nice fellow,
he remarked. When Finley looked back, he noted that the young man was watching them, frozen to the spot like a still life painting. He could only imagine what thoughts were racing through his head right now. No doubt the poor man was doubting his sanity. Finley couldn't say he blamed him. Meeting one of the gods of the dead kind of had that effect on people. The sky above them grew dark as the thunder rolled in, the sound of hooves echoing as the Dark One rode his white horse amongst the clouds. The Chester Zoo loomed on the horizon like a suffocating presence, a blending of real and impossible dark shapes that bent the lines between life and death. The car park, which formed a huge square area to the north of the building, was filled with diagonal rows of abandoned cars. Spanning over 128 acres, the attraction was made up of zoological gardens, eateries, and over 35,000 animals. It appeared that many of its carnivores were in attendance at the front entranceway. Andean and sun bears with their dark fur and oppressive black eyes loomed in the shadows. African painted dogs paced and hooted anxiously, their sounds like the laughter of frightened men at war. The gaboon and white-lipped island vipers curled around the large animal cutouts, and their ruler, the reticulated python, lay thick and heavy as a corpse beneath them, forked tongue tasting the intrusion of the gods on the airwaves. The kings of the plains, the wildcats, took pride of place like the destroyer's trophies. The tiger that Finley had faced only a few short days ago hovered by the lion's flank, her ears back and teeth exposed as hollows buzzed around the striped crown of her head. Blood stained the stones around their paws, and the animals at the back of the group feasted on fresh bodies dressed in soldiers' uniforms. The image of the young man they had left only a few minutes ago gripped Finley, and he ground his molars together to contain the nausea.
Oh, fuck!
He breathed, reaching up to cover his mouth.
War is not a beautiful thing, Finley Evans,
Sassy growled from his hand.
The poets often lie to keep their soldiers brave, but war is not a thing we should admire. It is love in its most violent and irrepressible of ways. Kill or be killed, life or death.
Maka has lost all of her humanity.
Salo's deep voice rumbled through the air, as powerful as ocean waves. The crowds parted for him as he made his way next to the souls he had saved. The other wildcats, ones that had previously been caged, roared at the black cat's form. It was obvious that many of them had been driven mad by the sounds of the corruptors in their heads.
We must not fall now, Finley,
the Grim snarled, his large teeth showing through the raised, thick skin of his jowls.
Give it all you've got. Yes, sir,
Finley answered.
Let's show them what the dead can do.
The beasts clashed like a hot and cold weather front, lightning sparking across the sky as paws swatted against jawbones. Mouths opened to show shelves of sharp bone and teeth. The cries of pain were drowned out by the rush of the wind, and rain began to hit the ground in buckets, soaking the attacking forces beneath. The sound of Dawn's horn echoed inside Finley's chest, and he shouted to release the force of it as he charged, twisting and swinging into the blackness. The beasts surrounded them and struck without hesitation, hunting down each of them in turn. Finley allowed himself to be pulled by Sassy's weight, moving into any of the gaps that she created. Thick rivets of water flattened his hair and choked his breath, and he spat onto the cement to clear his airways. Ahead of him, Reichardt battled like he was dancing, each step perfectly and intricately placed on the stone. His blades cut through the air with a high-pitched whistle. sending hollows fleeing from his strikes. Like a man who had trained in the theater all his life, the first Amarini flowed with grace, feet barely scuffing the ground as the red ribbon pulled taut between his agile fingers. When the material would catch, the man would respond by pulling, controlling the battle like a puppet master yanking on a marionette's strings. The glint of an unnatural light caught on the sharp edges of both blades, and then they were gone again, whispering past with a combination of speed and power that Finley could barely follow. The new power granted to them by Dia Tacita was palpable, pounding through their veins like a new lease of life. The animals dared not get too close to the man, spreading out from his strikes and circling him. From beneath his glasses, clear blue eyes planned their next movements. It was like watching a chess master at work. Every attack perfectly placed, every feint carefully constructed and implemented. Hollows flailed overhead, bleeding darkness into the air as they hissed and held back. The man stumbled forward and pulled tight on the end of the fabric, bringing both blades in to sever the connection to the animal in front of him. The lion's eyes rolled back in its head as it hit the ground, and Reichardt stepped over it without pause, moving on to the next targets. He split the darkness before them, parting the force of their enemies like Moses divided the Red Sea. In the center of the growling mass, Maka turned to face the invasion with a smile. She brought a hand across her body and sent out a blast of powerful violet light, and Finley leapt out of the way with his battle-axe pulled tight against his chest. Reichardt moved so quickly it was as if he hadn't moved at all, sidestepping with ease and turning the ribbon over in his grasp to fire it in her direction. The former goddess of war laughed as she grasped the connecting fabric and pulled him closer, the Amarini releasing his hold on one of the blades in favor of the other, circling with his wrist to send its partner into her back. She let out a bark of surprise as it cut into her skin, pulling darkness like blood from inside of her. Unlike the other hollows, the destroyer was made up of pure soul energy, something that could only come from the body of a corrupted god, one that's hunger for power grew and grew until the insatiable urge to feed was all that remained.
Reichardt, on your left!
The tall Amarini swept wide as Alvaro drove his reaper home, the resounding smack sending the woman reeling backwards. Hoping an opening would reveal itself, Finley tracked the motions of the other Amarini and pulled his weapon in close, striking when Sassy shouted,
"Now, Finn!"
The destroyer moved in to counterattack and swept him back, her magic fizzling on his coat like sparks. The skin beneath singed and he cried out, rolling across the dirt until he hit a wall. He choked as dust filled his empty chest and looked up when a hand took his own.
It's all right. It's me,
Abby soothed, forcing him to move his legs. He stumbled, leaning his weight against her as a shot from Scrappy's gun whizzed past, the boom following close behind. The destroyer waved a hand, and the magic turned to smoke in the air. fading even before Alvaro moved in for a follow-up strike. The mistress of the hollows bent at the waist to avoid the attack, grasping the older spirit by the collar of his jacket.
"You are starting to bore me, Amarini!"
she snarled and raised her other hand.
"This is war, not a circus. I demand your best!"
Amidst the black smoke of the gathering hollows, Finley missed Reichardt's next attack, but was relieved to see Alvaro's form wrenching free of her grasp and crawling along the dirt and sand with hammer in hand. Crimson ribbon fluttered past in his field of vision, and he gasped as he saw the tall Amarini smash into the ground with a surprised yell. Finley held up his battle-axe to intercept the coming blow, and he flinched as the burning pain raced through the muscles of his arms and legs. He could feel the ground giving way beneath him, and his doll began to quake. Every inch of him strained as if it would only take the smallest bit of additional force to pull him apart entirely. A hand appeared in his peripheries, and Finley didn't have to turn to know who it was. Spectre's eyes began to glow as he chanted, his sensitive's magic spreading to fill the air around them with light.
"Mutai tacite!"
the young man shouted, and a flash of power drove the corrupted goddess backwards and off balance. She was smiling when she straightened, a hand brushing back her long, dark locks with amusement. "Now this is interesting," she remarked. She spread her fingers and sent magic billowing outwards in all directions. One of the nearby Amarini hit the ground with a scream, grasping their arm as it turned to dust. Their partners dove on them from the darkness, sweeping them away from harm with fear in their eyes. "New magic from the Necromantion?" the goddess purred. "Don't tell me you've been to see the silent goddess after all this time. How is my old mentor? Still banished to that joke of an afterlife, is she?" Reichard held out his blades, the ribbons spread tightly in front of him.
"Your games end now, Maka!"
he growled, the light of the nearby fires reflected in his filthy lenses.
"You have proved whatever points you were trying to make."
"Point?" Maka laughed, shaking her head with feigned mirth. "There is no point to war. There is only blood, death, heat, the natural order of things. You can feel it in you, can't you?" She took another step forwards, her eyes glistening. "The thrill of it. You've never felt more alive than you do right now, have you?"
"So that's all this is to you?"
Reichard sneered, his disgust evident in the way his tail curled in against his back.
"An adrenaline boost! Le badinage!"
His skin began to flicker with light as the magic spread throughout his body. "Perhaps you've been dead for too long, little spirit," the destroyer teased. "You forget the true meaning of life, the struggle, the victory."
"You were the guardian of the gate,"
the first argued, the fire around them burning in his bright eyes.
"You saw their suffering firsthand, and yet you came here. You hurt them for your own amusement."
The man spat on the ground by her feet.
It appears you have learned nothing in your time on this earth, destructress.
The destroyer's eyes narrowed as she bared her fangs.
How dare you look down on me? You're nothing but a cat spirit's pity project.
She dove forward with reckless fury, and Rykart evaded, pulling the crimson wire tight as the blades snagged on her throat and collarbone. He maneuvered to stand against her back, flexing both arms to pull her tight against him as she flailed.
Look at the people around you, Maka,
he demanded, angling her back towards the car park and the frightened staff that were sheltering behind their parked cars.
This is not what it means to be alive. Life is about love, devotion, sacrifice.
He chewed on his lower lip until it split.
You used to believe in these things as well.
The hollow thrashed wildly, clawing at the air as she twisted to strike the man against her back. Black smoke began to billow from her every pore, ink-like liquid oozing from where tears had previously clouded her eyes. Her skin darkened inch by inch as she grew, her eyes becoming redder and more alien with every blink. Finley and Alvaro struck at her sides with every new opening, but her flesh grew tough as worker-grade rubber, barely reacting to their attacks. Scrappy approached from the front with their gun tucked in against their side, their thick bullets bouncing off the woman's dark frame as the cases clattered along the stone ground like the falling rain.
Mutae tacite!
Finley shouted, and the woman's body jolted, spasming against the explosion of power that was pulling her in all directions. Muscular white hounds circled her feet as Auron materialized next to them, bones rattling as he pulled up the weeds beneath the ground to grasp her legs and hold her in place. The earth fractured and pulled apart under the force of her step, and the god's expression twisted in concentration as he poured the last of his magic into the holds.
Mutae tacite!
Maka screamed as the hollows within her fought the spell, writhing under the surface of her skin. Smoke and ash rose from her pores as she began to absorb more of them, their souls disintegrating as she consumed them.
Reich!
Finley shouted as he stumbled backwards, trying to find his footing. He could already feel the energy being yanked from his doll when he used the goddess's magic. Right now, he felt like he would pass out on his feet. Rykart grunted, clenching his teeth as his magic began to flicker out, like a light bulb slowly dimming to extinction.
I can't hold her, he choked. We need more power. Sassy!
Finley shouted, wrapping his bloodied hands around the wooden handle.
Lend me any power that you have.
I'll try,
she answered, and a wave of heat rolled over him as he charged forward, the steel blade biting the air around her and rebounding from Maka's thickening skin. Each strike was punctuated with the words of the spell of silence, and each time Finley felt the world flash out of existence and then rush in again. His head spun. Every movement was jarring. Rykart pressed his feet into the hollow's back and straightened, pulling the red fabric up like he was attempting to break a wild horse. As the creature began to thrash, he felt his grip starting to loosen, and in the blink of an eye he was on his back, the monstrous form of a black hollow over him. No longer feminine in its appearance, the creature was now little more than a black blob with large, taloned hands and a gaping mouth that screamed. The clang of steel on bone made Reichardt open his eyes, and he stared up as Finley stood over him, barely holding off the creature's jaws. "Finley," he gasped, panting breathlessly beneath the young man's bent stance. "You need to run, Reich!" Finley strained. A flush of hot air washed over the pair from the monster's open mouth, saliva dripping down the sides of the battle axe. The vileness of her breath stung his eyes, and he struggled to keep them open. "The spell isn't strong enough. We need more." Finley let out a grunt of discomfort as she pressed down on him, his legs buckling under the force of her. He could feel her body heat, the looming presence of her blocking out all the sun's light. "You do not understand how I have suffered. There were no humans left who would love me. No one on this rotten plain that would remember my name." She heaved forward, and Finley swore, his green eyes staring up at her in terror. "I guarded that door for eternity. I kept the weak souls of Hades from vanishing into the abyss. And yet my father saw fit to leave me there to decay. I was not welcome in his house of the gods." "I saw the gates," Finley choked out weakly. "I saw the kingdom of Hades. It would not have been safe without you and your sisters." "Damn my sisters!" Maka spat. "Do you think my sisters cared of my plight? Do you think they came to ease my burdens with songs or stories? No, I was left with nothing. No blood, no honor, only duty." "You've seen the pain that war can cause," Finley stuttered, fighting back against her weight, even as his doll began to tremble. "Why would you wish that on anyone?" "Because, little spirit," she purred, eyes sharp as two knives. "The sweetest love can only come from the deepest agony." The goddess snapped forward with blackened claws, clinging to the flesh of Finley's chest. He could barely contain his screams as Sassy flashed with an illuminous glow, beating back the curve of her sharp nails. "Sassy," the Amorini croaked. "Buy me just a little more time, please." "Finley," Reichardt called out from under him, stretching up to press his own reapers against his companion's side. "Take this." "I raised you from the dirt," the hollow howled, pressing her chest against the barricade of Finley's battle axe. "Without war, you would be worms upon your bellies. Fat, wasted." Her eyes were black, the whites completely swallowed up by the hollows she had consumed. Finley could hear the voices swarming inside her, the screams just on the other side of her skin. Finley reached back blindly and felt the cold metal press into his palm. Bringing his hand up to hold his axe again, he noted the familiar blades in between his fingers. "These are your reapers, Reich?" The first Amorini nodded and smiled softly at the other man's back.
There is one more spell we haven't tried yet.
Reikart's hand began to glow as he reached his long fingers inside his chest, pulling out a pulsing ball of purple light. He reached over the other man's shoulders to press the orb against the battle axe.
We'll do this together, Finn. I've got you.
Finley nodded, pushing hard against the blade and feeling the warmth of the other man's magic spreading outwards from within the steel, fusing both of their weapons together within Finley's grip. The light spread along the edge of the battle axe, lengthening it out into a long, thin arch. He could feel a deep, booming echo behind each of Sassy's words as the new power intermingled with her own.
Oh, I don't know what this is, but I feel fucking awesome!
Her little voice reverberated inside his head. As the purple began to fade away again, Finley was shocked to be holding an honest-to-goodness, real-life Reaper's scythe. The destroyer began to withdraw, pushed back by the force of the new weapon. Finley felt the power rolling up inside his chest and roared as he threw the blade forward, slashing into the space where the hollow's stomach once was. The scythe was more than weightless in his grasp, the handle long and thin as a radius bone. It moved before he even had the chance to think of his next attack, as if the weapon could predict every strike he wanted to make. The impossibly thin blade whistled through the air, sending globs of the creature's form splashing out on all sides. Voices cheered inside the scythe, Sassy's voice mingling with something new that the Amarini did not recognize. But Finley was no longer thinking, just moving. The scythe whirled and slashed around him as his breathing slowed. He let his instincts guide him, like a painter caught in the throes of divine inspiration. Finley did not need to open his eyes to know that he was painting a tapestry of ruin across his adversary. The hollow wailed and pleaded, obscuring its face from the orange light with two large clawed hands. No longer did it try to hide itself in the shape of its goddess host. Now the creature was large and monstrous, like a sketch of a nightmare drawn by a child's hand. The destroyer shrieked as the scythe cleaved its shoulder in two, the hollow writhing in pain as it reached towards the cat-like spirits pushing back against it. Finley could see himself reflected in its red eyes. Eyes that would never be a goddess again.
All of your friends will die by my hand,
came a weak voice from the creature. The destroyer choked, gurgling on her own viscous fluids as she reached up towards them from the ground.
Erased! They will be a speck of dust in the endless void! Shut up!
Finley snarled. He raised the scythe into the air as he bared his sharp teeth.
You don't get to talk about them like that!
The destroyer lay prone, bent and wounded. From underneath the monstrous shape, he could just about make out the human form inside. She laughed weakly, darkness dribbling down from her open mouth. Her jaw hung loose, held on by little more than the shadows of her slick skin.
You understand.
Finley brought the scythe down hard against the hollow's jaw, shattering the bones in a burst of amber light as he let out a feral scream, hoarsening his throat in a rush of anger. Flames erupted from the points where the blade met the creature's bare soul, and she howled in pain as he cut right through her. "Ah, now you truly understand," she screamed.
"I will never understand you,"
Finley spat angrily.
"Death was never about suffering. It's about love and sacrifice, about creating a better world for the people we leave behind."
"You can take away our lives, our hopes, our memories, even our very souls," Rykart whispered as he took a step back, releasing his hold on the other man and allowing the new weapon to settle into his friend's grip alone. "But the one thing that you can never take away from us are our choices." Rykart studied his fingertips in the orange glow of his companion's magic. He smiled sadly at what he saw and closed his eyes. Humming a quiet melody, he removed his glasses and cleaned them on the bottom of his shirt. As Finley pressed the blade against the destroyer's throat and severed the last of her flesh, she wheezed as her last breath hit the air. "And I will always choose you, Mon Ami." Rykart smiled as he reached up to place the glasses back onto the bridge of his nose. To be continued in Chapter 31.